Okay, so how many times have you been in a situation where you had to take a bunch of meaningless or unformatted text and turn it into something that makes sense? You can't just use a simple find and replace because it can take forever and you might actually be adding more work on your hands. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use regular expressions, which can save you hours of your time. And you definitely don't need to be in IT. You don't need to be a software engineer to use them because they're super simple to write. So we're going to go through a series of examples so you can easily learn how this works. First of all, it's important to note that a simple text editor is not going to work here. We need a tool that supports regular expressions as a search mode. And based on what operating system you're using, you have several options. If you're using Windows, Notepad++ is a great tool, and that's what we'll actually be using in this video. But if you're on a Mac or Linux, I recommend using brackets or Sublime Text. And for all of these, I've included links to each tool in the video description. But of course, if you don't want to install anything, I recommend using RegEx101.com to do this on a browser. Let's look at this first example where I have a bunch of text and I'm trying to hunt down only numbers. That's difficult to do manually, and I can't use a simple find and replace because it could be any number. When using most text editors, you do need to ensure that regular expression is selected. And to look for only numbers, let's try using 0-9 in bracket form. You can see how this expression now finds numbers like 2, 4, and 7. But when it gets to 56, it sees 5 and 6 as separate matches. That's because we're telling it to find only one digit. So to look for numbers of multiple digits, we need to add a plus at the end. So now doing a find again will now get it to see numbers like 56 and others as a single match. Now let's take an example where we are searching for letters. Let's go ahead and turn on match case. And also, instead of 0 through 9, we need to use A-Z here because there is a catch. Since we're dealing with letters, we need to account for case sensitivity. If you look at the matches, it skipped the T and the H here because they're uppercase. We'll need to add A-Z in capital letters, and now you'll see that it's matching entire lowercase and uppercase words. And now for our next one, let's go over a concept where something starts with and ends with a pattern. And these are just randomly generated codes, but what we're going to do is try to remove lines where codes start with a 9. So like the first line, for example. Ensure that the replace option is available in addition to the find. So first we'll type in a caret sign, which means this is the start of a line. Then we'll type in code space 0-9 in brackets plus, which tells it that this will be a number. And a colon comes after that, space 9. Then we'll use a wildcard written by a dot and then an asterisk. So for those of you not familiar with wildcards, this basically means that it can match either anything, any number of times, or nothing. And then finally a $sign that indicates the end of a line. So let's go ahead and run this on the first 5 lines. And you may have noticed that it skipped lines 2, 3, and 4. That's because not every line has a space after the colon. So this means we need to tell it that the space character is optional by typing a question mark after the space. Let's now replace these lines with nothing to remove them. Okay, so we have now successfully removed all lines with code starting with a 9. Now we'll look at another example where we need to remove exact occurrences of characters. And so in this case, there's a bunch of exclamation marks at the end of each line. Let's try to change this entire block of text where each line cannot end with more than 5 exclamation symbols. So what we want to end up with is something like this, where lines beyond 5 have exclamation points reduced to exactly 5. So we'll type in an exclamation point, and then in curly braces a 6, and then a comma. This is the first part that indicates 6 or more. And then finally a $sign that indicates the end of a line, like we did before. And of course, for our replacement, we'll simply put 5 exclamation marks. After running this, you can see that lines 1 through 5 remained the same, whereas lines 6 and beyond were updated to 5 exclamation symbols. Now we'll go over a slightly more complicated situation. This is a ridiculously long chunk of text I copied from a sample generator online. And part of the reason why it looks so sloppy is because it needs to be broken down into paragraphs. Let's say we want to do this ourselves, where every, let's say about 1500 characters, a new paragraph gets inserted. And we also need to keep basic grammar in mind, where a new paragraph shouldn't be started until at least a period is found after that. So let's start the expression with a dot, which means this character could be anything. And then right after that, let's append 1500 in curly braces, which tells it to match every set of 1500 characters that it finds. Don't forget the part where we need to find the first occurrence of a period after that. We can do this by adding dot asterisk or the wildcard followed by a question mark slash dot. The wildcard and question mark are there because between the 1500th character and the next dot, there could be several characters or none at all. And we're using a slash prior to the period because we're telling it that this is a literal dot and not something else that has a special meaning to it, like what we used here. So in regular expressions, this concept is known as escaping. Finally, we'll wrap the entire expression with parentheses so that we can capture this paragraph to use as part of the replacement. In the replace string, we'll start with /1 to fetch the first captured group, which we just talked about. In short, this is our paragraph candidate. Then we'll add 2 lines, which are done by using /r/n twice. And if I run this and choose to replace all, you can see how each segment of about 1500 characters is now organized into paragraphs. Now let's try to solve the problem I showed you in the beginning of this video. Again, to recap, we want to turn it into something like this, where it's cleaner and a lot smaller. So starting from the left, we can see that each line can start with just about any number of tab characters or spaces. And in our regular expression, we'll use a caret symbol showing the start of a line first. And then after that, in brackets, we'll use /t and a space to indicate tabs or spaces. The plus sign, of course, is going to tell it tabs or spaces can happen more than once. Then the line item part is pretty straightforward, and we'll add 0-9 in brackets plus, telling it that this can be a multi-digit number. However, the number itself needs to be surrounded by parentheses because we need to capture this as a group. Pay close attention to how we're adding a question mark after the colon. That's because there are instances where this colon is not there, so we're saying that this is optional. We're almost there, so let's keep going. Now we need to capture the price in dollars and cents as well as the total discount. Just as we did before, you can do this by capturing the numbers in parentheses. Last but not least, we'll add a $sign after percent because that signals the end of each line. Let's quickly test this and make sure that the first couple of lines are being matched. And indeed, we're definitely clear to move forward. Thankfully, the replacement string is not that complicated. Let's start with /1 to write the line item number followed by a period. Then we'll add a tab by typing /t. Product price has a colon and 1 space added after it followed by the $sign. And immediately after this comes the dollar amount from our second capture group. That's why we have a /2 there. Then we add a dot followed by the total cents with that amount from the third capture group. And let's separate this from the discount with another /t, which is a tab character. And finally, the discount, which is written in a percentage format as opposed to the literal percent from before. If we go ahead and run this, you'll see that we finally have it in the format that we need. So again, think of the amount of time that you'd be saving yourself if this file was thousands of lines long. This is where using regular expressions matters the most. And when using regular expressions, you want to keep it as simple as possible. I say that because many times you'll realize that there's more than one way to find regex matches. So for example, let's say you are trying to find the word colors that's spelled in two different ways. One way you might be thinking of doing this is to add a pipe between the O and the OU in parentheses. This is certainly valid, but what if you made this simpler by just using a question mark after the U? Again, both do the same thing, but it's clear which one was shorter and faster to write. And by the way, if you need to see more examples of regular expressions, you can check out this cheat sheet from rexegg.com, which is a pretty good reference, and I've included this link in the video description. So I hope this helps you solve problems a lot faster when you're working with a lot of text. And more importantly, you should be able to find and replace just about anything. Thanks for watching. And for more tech videos or ways to save you time, please consider subscribing to this channel.